Okay, welcome to Into the Channel podcast, primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us. We do this every single week, sometimes twice a week, spanning the wide world of women's football. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. Links to Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, all available in the show notes of this episode. I am your host, Dino DeCespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
Oh, I'm feeling fantastic, buddy. Match week 15 of the NWSL, worthy of celebrating, if you ask me. Oh, he's got a little beverage himself.
Yeah, I'm drinking some seltzer today, keeping it light.
Understandable.
Boy, I might have a case of the Rona I'm battling here, so talk about that one later. Maybe we won't.
That's what podcasts are good for. Two dudes discussing any kind of infectious disease. Maybe let's save that for another podcast. Although, let me just say, your boys are on the right side of history with that one. Firmly believe in medical science, if I may speak for the show.
Speak away, my good man. All right, man, match week 15, you mentioned it. We're starting to see a little bit of separation. This is a show that, I don't want to say we popularized the tiers in the NWSL, but we were certainly on the ground floor of that. Mm-hmm. We're starting to see the tiers really shake themselves out here. Teams at the bottom, you don't want to be one of the managers of those teams because job security it's an issue at this point. But yeah, a ton went down this weekend. Where do you want to get started?
So I think every match week, you kind of have a few things that jump out. So let's try something new this week. You should pick a team and I'll pick a team. And who is your team of the week? Or maybe it's like the spotlight team. We can work out how we want to describe this. But if I say, okay, match week 15, we're coming right off of it. What's the flashbulb in your mind? Who is Dino's team of the week?
I got to say, I was really impressed with what the Courage did against the Spirit. This was a team that on the road, big time struggles.
Yeah.
7 road matches this season. You're looking at it, no wins, no draws, 7 losses. So you get a team like that heading to Washington, one of the hottest teams in the league. I mean, we've spent a ton of airtime talking about their attackers and just kind of everything that they've got going on. I got to say, I was very impressed with what the Courage did. Tremendous effort. The Courage played my Orlando Pride a couple weeks back, and we joined our friends at the Loud and Proud Orlando podcast, did a little preview on it, and I remember saying, okay, we're going to North Carolina. That's going to be tough. They're a really good team at home. But I feel like this one's going to be dictated by who gets to play ball their way. And I think the way the Courage play ball, when they played their kind of game, very, very impressive. So I went back because I just wanted to look at one stat. I'm like, this team seems to possess a lot of the ball. That was a real formula against Washington. So in 13 of the Courage's 15 matches this season, they won the possession battle, 13 out of 15. The only times they didn't win, it was 50-50 against Orlando, 50-50 against Gotham.
Okay.
So they've never lost a possession battle all season, and it really shows. I mean, what did you take away from that performance?
The main takeaway from this match is that the Courage just have an ability to just kind of smother your offensive attack, where they can just kind of push you into areas where you don't want to be, kind of keep you going backwards, kind of make you reset your offense a lot of times. I mean, I think the book is out there on Feli Rausch, who is just one of the better defenders in the world. Narumi Miura, one of their defensive midfielders out of Japan. Denise O'Sullivan playing beside her. Like, they have players who just make life difficult on attacking players. And I got to say, I didn't totally see it coming when you have a team that has Rodman, Bethune, and Sarr. So I just walk away from it incredibly impressed.
Yeah, I mean, Bethune specifically had a rough day. She just looked like she was on the wrong frequency in this one. Yeah. And I think you have to credit the Courage defensively for just throwing looks at Bethune that she wasn't really able to decode. You mentioned Denise O'Sullivan, defensive midfielder for the Courage. What a monster game O'Sullivan had. 80 touches, that's her second highest this season, 4 tackles, season high 6 interceptions, season high 6 blocks. She was everywhere, harassing. Ashley Sanchez, she gets the revenge goal. Obviously, she gets traded from the Spirit for the 5th pick. That becomes Hal Hirschfeld. She had an Instagram post, to quote Sanchez here, shocked and heartbroken to be leaving such a special place, as her goodbye Washington post. Shocked and heartbroken. Sort of feels like maybe this trade might have caught her off guard.
Yeah.
But props to Sanchez. She nets the revenge goal. Becomes the difference in the match. They get a monster win. Their first non-loss on the road this season. And then walking away from this one, I couldn't help but think, if the Courage can play this type of defense and also show this type of chemistry, where it's not just that they're stopping attacks, they just seem to be in perfect position. The passing is crisp. They're out-passing teams. They're out-possessing teams. There's been some murmurs about 2023 NWSL MVP Caroline. Maybe starting to work up a sweat in some training. We've talked about the length of this season. We talked last week about maybe teams prioritizing, deprioritizing the cup, the shield, door A, door B, which door do we want to go down here? The Courage feel like a team, if they can get a Caroline back, playing this style of play, like, knockout football. It's like, all right, we know what we got to do. Let's just hold the fort. Let's be smart. Let's possess. Let's connect our passes. And you put a player like that back up top. I mean, you look back to last year, they got knocked out by Gotham. No Caroline in that one. I think the injury happened maybe right before that. But
right.
I don't know. Could there be something here come playoff time?
Yeah, man, that is a pretty interesting prospect. The MVP coming back, you mentioned it. She was hurt in either the final match or the second to last match at the end of last season, playing so fantastic that she secured the MVP before then, wasn't involved in the playoff loss. Even if she's able to kind of, just give you 25 minutes or 20 minutes in the first match and kind of just start to work her way back. The Courage also signed 26-year-old forward/midfielder Courtney Vine out of the A-League in Australia, one of the breakout stars of the past World Cup. I think Tyler Lucy has played well for the Courage, but if you swap her out at kind of a left attacking midfielder and you put Courtney Vine there, and now you also put Caroline, the last year's MVP, into the lineup, and this team is already in a playoff position, we're looking at an extremely, extremely dangerous side.
Absolutely. And I think another shout out to Ashley Sanchez, who I think has been kind of carrying a lot, on her shoulders and able to be productive. And this was just such a huge hump to get over. This team had struggled mightily on the road, and this was a very, very losable match. No midweek, no midweek matchup to kind of find some tired legs on the other side. Like, this was a straight up, all right, we got to go to their house. And I mean, the performance was like Washington just couldn't get anything going. And I think when you look back, kind of recontextualize a lot of the season, just be like, okay, well, we know Caroline's out, but if they are able to inject a player like that back into the lineup, we've talked about this with other teams, it kind of like moves everybody down a peg with regard to like, okay, now the other 9-10 players don't have to carry so much weight. Mm-hmm. It's more evenly distributed. And she's such a home run hitter that, I don't know, knockout football. I wouldn't want to see that team. And what's fun is now the Courage sits in 6th, the Spirit sit in 3rd. So if the playoffs start tomorrow,
wow,
these two teams would go heads up once again.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I love a good game of if the playoffs started today. It's one of the greatest games you could possibly play in any sports conversation. I think we'll talk about it more later. Do you have anything else on the Courage?
Nothing more on the Courage. I want to shift gears and I want to see and hear about what team caught your eye. What team's in Grant's spotlight this weekend?
All right. So speaking of teams in that second half of the playoff standings, I think we both kind of had the same idea when we thought about doing these spotlights. Give me the Chicago Red Stars. They notch a 3-0 victory at San Diego over the Wave. Now a struggling Wave, a Wave that is in a lot of flux. I think it's an impressive win nonetheless.
Definitely impressive. Definitely impressive. I couldn't help but think. We talked a lot of Wave on the show this past few weeks. What's the opposite of a new manager bounce? Is it new manager thud? A new manager splat? I mean, I don't know. We'll work on the branding, but the bounce didn't quite bounce. This past weekend, they looked as flat as a pancake. But that's not to take away anything from Chicago, who I think played really, really well. And they got some magic from that future Olympian up front.
100%. So I'm gonna run through a couple of things here. So, let's just get the rest of the San Diego stuff out of the way. So yeah, very interesting week to say the least. They fired their Shield-winning manager Casey Stoney days prior, but they also had to kind of deal with the news that Alex Morgan was not selected to the Olympic squad. I feel like that was something that was kind of like hovering around. You have to answer questions about it. Not saying it takes anything away, but then you kind of have this interesting situation of like, there's Gurma, there's Jaden Shaw. And now you kind of have Alex Morgan, the icon there, just dangling out there. So there's that. Red Stars manager, and I believe I can fairly say Into the Channel favorite, Lorne Donaldson, said pre-match that he expected San Diego to come out like, quote, a pack of wild hyenas, end quote. This was mentioned a couple times to chuckles over the broadcast. I think it is a funny quote. I'll say this about our pal Lorne. That was pretty much the only thing he got wrong on Friday, because the Wave did not come out like hyenas. Unless hyenas are known for not being organized, which maybe that was what he secretly meant. But
do hyenas hibernate?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Who knows? But I think when you looked at the Red Stars, they were good on set pieces. They did creative stuff, whether it was corners or free kicks. Hannah Anderson at center back, Carrie Riccaro in the midfield, they were doing nice work defensively. You already know what time it is if you know Lorne Donaldson's background with the Jamaican national team in the 2023 World Cup. That dude knows how to get defensive buy-in and get a defense organized. Chicago had 39% of the ball in this match. They only had 27% of the ball in the second half.
Wow.
But I will say, the Wave, they looked a little dangerous in some spots. They had maybe a little less than a handful of spots where I thought maybe somebody could have scored, but they did not look that threatening. And a lot of those shots that they took barely even phased Alyssa Nair.
Yeah, I mean, even you look at Morgan's penalty kick, talk about not phasing Alyssa Nair. I don't really want to have the Alex Morgan conversation again, but I think there just might be something to, she's such a huge figure. We've talked about, the Mamba in LA, R.I.P. Kobe. Towards the back half of towards the end of his career,
right,
he became so big in stature that the players just had to find a spot to stand where they weren't going to just, rustle up against Kobe and kind of what he was doing. Sure. I think there is a little bit of that with this Wave side. And now with Casey Stoney out, I'm not going to say I expect them to figure out, how to reorient the offense and find situations where they can extract more value, more productivity from Morgan. I think she's still definitely got it in the tank. But for sure, the setup that they've got, it's not working at all. They look like a complete and absolute mess. They don't look like a team that could beat any other team in the league, I don't think. Utah, BFC, I think on a neutral field, I'm picking probably any other team right now, considering how they've looked. We see this often, not only in football, in other sports as well, where a team will quit on their coach.
Yeah.
Now, I kind of raised the question when the Casey Stoney news broke. It doesn't quite feel right. It kind of feels like one of those moves where, all right, we signed a bunch of players, you spent a lot of money, it's not working. I don't know, fire the coach. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the thought process. And I also commented, all right, we're going to see. We're going to see how much of the issue was the manager. And I think usually the new manager bounce is often correlated with like, all right, get this fucking guy out of here or whoever, right? Like let's just start over. But it does feel like this isn't a team that has quit on their coach, but maybe it's a team that has quit on their organization because they looked worse to my eye than they had in previous weeks. That's not usually what you see when a manager kind of gets bounced. Very curious to get your opinion on that.
It's an interesting point. It's bold too. You win the Shield the year prior. Can it go south that quickly? We've seen it happen with teams, like to your point, across multiple sports. It's a tale as old as athletics itself that, you lose the buy-in, something happens in the locker room. We haven't done any reporting on that. They looked worse. We started this by talking about the Chicago Red Stars and what they're able to do. And we've also when we talked about the new manager bounce, teams try to time it. And maybe the powers that be in San Diego thought, okay, we have a home match against a mid-table team like Chicago. Fire Stoney. We try to do the reset. Maybe we get a draw out of this. Maybe we get a win out of this. We change the trajectory. There might not be a coach that I would want to coach against less than Lorne Donaldson when there's a little bit of disarray in my team,
Mm-hmm.
and he can just work with very talented defenders and one of the best goalkeepers in the league in Chicago and be like, oh, you guys are frustrated? I have like 6 more things that my side can do that I know my players are good enough to execute that are just going to continue to frustrate the hell out of you. And I will tell you, if you look at Chicago's stats, this is courtesy of our pals over at FBref, Chicago has never had more than 50% of the ball in a league match this season.
Wow.
The most they have had the ball was 47% possession versus the Thorns, and that was in a 2-0 loss at home in Chicago or outside of Chicago where they play. So,
Bridgeview.
Speaking of playing at home versus away, Chicago is 2 wins, 0 draws, 5 losses at home. And now, after this victory in San Diego, they are 4 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses away. And I just think you have a combination of players and a scheme and just a style and identity that if you're already frustrated, you're not in for any relief when you go up and play against them.
That's a great point. I was thinking about this Chicago team specifically. They kind of remind me of the Leicester City team that won the title.
That's funny.
Where you've got Swanson, Jamie Vardy spot, maybe N'Golo Kante is, I don't know, we'll swap him in for Sam Staub maybe, in terms of like just impactful, even though the midfield defender there, great goalkeeping. But it's really just like, we're just going to sit back. We're going to kind of like play it cool. We're not going to panic. You can go full hyena on us.
Sure.
But then when the time comes, we know what to do. And they absolutely got it done. Like this Chicago team, when you think about, did Chicago really take this one or did the Wave kind of give this one away? It's pretty much 100% of both.
Sure.
Like I think the Wave kind of rolled over and Chicago came in and laid the smackdown. Like this team should not be 3 goals better on the road at San Diego, but credit to them. They were like, all right, well, if you're going to come out here at 70 to 80% speed and not really match our level, not really match our intensity, we're going to embarrass you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what we saw.
I love that they play. I think it's right. I think they play with that attitude. And I think when you watch Staub and Swanson on the field, I know we always point them out specifically, they play with that kind of attitude themselves.
Nair?
Yeah, Nair too. I mean, she will stare you down, stop your penalty kick, and then go and blast one past your keeper herself. So let me ask you let me give you a hypothetical here. Oh, and first, before I do that, Ali Schlegel didn't even play in this match. Mm-hmm. She has 4 goals on the season, matching Penelope Hawking's 4 goals. Mallory Swanson has 6. Let me give you a situation here. So I have a team, and my team has one of the 5 best forwards in the league. I've also gotten at least 1 goal out of 10 players on my squad. I have one of the best 2 or 3 goalkeepers in the league. I have a defense anchored by one of the best center backs in the league. I have a manager with a proven track record of playing a successful defensive counterattacking style. And my team has proven it can win on the road. Mm-hmm. So, serious question. Do you think this team has enough to win 3 games in a row?
I would say depends on the opponent.
Sure.
I think there are some offenses where if you give them enough of the ball, they'll just outlast you, break you down, wear you down. I'm thinking of Kansas City specifically.
Yep.
Just a quick sidebar there. The Dash, pretty good showing. Defensively, like they're pesky, they're scrappy. Tarsiane made a mess of a couple of those situations there, but 90 plus minutes of Temo Chowinga will do that to pretty much anybody.
Yeah.
But I think defensively they held up pretty well, but ultimately, they broke through. If you kind of play that game against some of the teams at the very top, there's only so much Mal Swanson magic. I'm glad you mentioned Hawking. I think she's been a great Robin to, Mal Swanson's Batman here, like just a great secondary option.
Yep.
Really productive, really exciting player as well. I think it's possible. I mean, Swanson would have to hit God level basically, which is not out of the question.
Yes, I would agree.
You couple a few Nair performances, some Lauren Donaldson whiteboard magic, some Mal Swanson on the pitch magic, and they could absolutely win 3 in a row, especially, come crunch time down the stretch or in the playoffs. But would I pick it? Not sure I would pick it.
And for good reason, my good man, because they have yet to win 3 games in a row this season. I'm not saying it's completely out of the realm of possibility, but the reason I bring this up is that if you think about all those factors, I do think when you enter the playoffs, and we've talked about this, I think you and I have agreed with our pal John Rollins over at Loud and Proud Orlando, that the NWSL Shield, that feels like the title. That feels like the best representation of who's the best team. But winning the NWSL Championship, that's a 3-match cup, essentially.
Yeah.
Going from 8 to 4 to 2 with one winner, obviously. Now, 3 Supernova Swanson performances in a row, I don't think is completely off the board. 3 Supernova Nair performances in a row, definitely not off the board. To get them at the exact same time, we're starting to run low on our probability charts, if you want to look at it this way. But I think if you are a Chicago Red Stars fan, we'll play one of our favorite games if the playoffs started today, they would be playing the team that you're wearing on your shirt right now. And I do think that is one of the squads that you mention. If you give enough chances, if they are in your defensive third for most of the match, it's almost impossible to withstand Bonda and Marta, Doyle, Adriana, all those great players. So I will say, I think they're live going into the playoffs. I think that's what they're looking for. I don't think they have quite enough to contend. I think they pretty clearly don't have enough to contend for the Shield now, but they have the bones of a team that can compete for the Shield moving forward. We'll see, how much money they start spending, who they're able to acquire. But I think if you're a Red Stars fan, I think you go into the playoffs going, I don't know, can we win in Orlando? Maybe we can. But I also think you would like to maybe scoot up the standings a little bit to avoid Bonda in the first match of the playoffs.
Yeah, I would even say it's going to be interesting because a team like Chicago, a team with like real defensive DNA, can flip the field with Swanson and Hawking up there very quickly. They got to be trying to think about positioning against KC, in my opinion.
Sure.
Because that Orlando defense, I tweeted it, I think we're at 295 or 297 straight minutes, not counting stoppage time, of clean sheet football in the NWSL, where teams are just going bananas scoring goals.
Yeah.
I think Swanson would probably be more excited about a current matchup than a Pride matchup.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's not just winning 3 in a row now. It's winning 3 in a row against playoff teams, against top 8 teams.
That's a good point.
And if you're, and all of a sudden, if you're in that 5 to 8 range, you also have to go on the road. And this isn't the same. This isn't exactly the same as what's happening in North Carolina, where you've got an MVP, maybe possibly working your way back. The Chicago team is loosely the team. I definitely agree with you. I think they could get hot. I could see this team definitely winning one playoff matchup in upset fashion. And then from there, it's like, can you string 2 together?
Right.
We see this corollary in the NBA a lot. Who's the best player? Who's the best player on the floor? Who's the best player on the pitch? If you got the best player on the pitch, you've always got a chance.
That is where you raise such a good point about it's not just winning 3 in a row, it's winning 3 in a row against playoff teams. If you have to play against Barbara Bonda, as much as we like Mel Swanson is now firmly the second best player on the pitch. That's no slight against Mel Swanson, obviously. No shame in being second place there. So obviously you should be encouraged by 4 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses on the road. Not the ideal scenario. You might want to play a home playoff match, but something to look for. And I just think there's some good reason for optimism in Chicago. But I do want to touch on another point you made. The interesting thing, and it is much maligned on this podcast that we don't have any real visibility into the NWSL salary cap on these teams and their situation and how much money they're spending and all that stuff. I don't know. Maybe when the August 1st transfer window opens up, or maybe in these coming weeks, we might see who's out there available for Chicago to sign. I got to think it's a relatively attractive location to lure free agents, especially if they're passing out bags with it. So it'll be interesting to see how much of this is their team. They piqued my interest. With anytime you win 3-0 away, I don't care if the other team is in disarray. You get a 3-0 win away, I'm probably going to put the spotlight on you for the week.
Yeah, that's a great call. I was just doing some quick Googling here. It does appear that Fran Kirby is still in the free agent pool.
Oh, boy.
I think a player like that would be an interesting fit in Chicago. Fit. Yeah, well, we're out here flexing some GM chops, just saying, in case there's any openings anywhere.
Yeah, we're available.
Absolutely. I want to shift gears, though. So we hit our teams that we want to spotlight. Now, I also want to do that on the player side. A little bit of a player spotlight. This week, I took a close look at Kansas City Current's Claire Hutton. 18 years old, kind of has a little bit of like a young Kira Walsh kind of vibe. Just keeps the ball moving. I think pass completion wise, she's decent, but this is an 18-year-old player. She's the youngest player in the league to top 1,000 minutes out of 84 total players, and she's well over 1,000. 1,268 total. She's top 25 in minutes in the entire league. She's appeared in all 15 matches, second most minutes on her team, first if you count non-goalkeepers. She's also second on the team in progressive passes. This one I loved. She leads the entire league in plus minus, plus 20.
Nice.
While she's on the pitch. Now, if you pull the minutes out of there and say, okay, what's the plus minus per 90? She's still ninth. She's still top 10. This is an 18-year-old player at plus 1.42. That's what her teams are doing. Her plus 20 on the season is 3 better than Temwa Chawinga.
Wow.
Who's also appeared in 15 matches. So she's clearly having an impact. She's a young player with pedigree. So she first represented the U.S. under-17 national team at the 2022 CONCACAF Women's U17 Championship. She scored 6 goals there. They won the tournament. This is a player definitely on the USWNT radar, and she's just been excellent. I think her name first came up when we were having the Rookie of the Year conversation. And we're like, okay, we're talking Bethune, talking Centnor, a couple outsiders, Emma Sears, Hirschfeld, and somebody was like, well, Claire Hutton. She's got to be in the conversation.
Yep.
And I think I was like, okay, I need to really kind of like reconsider that. And then just watching her in this one, she's just so steady, and stature-wise, she also doesn't look like an 18-year-old player.
Right.
She looks like an athletic centerpiece type player. So I'm just extremely excited to see where she goes. And a little bit unlike some of the teams that we covered previously, this current team is going to be in the mix for the Shield. Mm-hmm. They're going to be in the mix for the Cup. They're going to be in the mix for a top 2 seed, maybe the top seed. So we're going to get to see Hutton play some big time NWSL football this season.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I like the words you used: steady, great stature, consistent. You mentioned 15 matches played, 14 of them starts, only 2 yellow cards for a player who is in a lot of times in a defensive midfield type position. She's in the 88th percentile compared to other midfielders in terms of aerial duels won. She's also in the 87th percentile in shot attempts. Now, she does not have a goal on the season, but that's not what she's there for Kansas City. So that steadiness, she might not be a Sharpie player for Kansas City right now, but I don't know. I mean, if you play nearly 1,270 minutes throughout the season, maybe you are a Sharpie player, but at the very worst, she's in there in pen, and she's giving you good minutes and knows how to play within the system. I think this is a great shout for her. And, whoever was shouting her out for our Rookie of the Year conversation, that is absolutely an informed opinion, and I appreciate them bringing it up and you kind of bringing these stats to light, because you're right. Like, I just kind of see her out there. I'm like, oh yeah, she's one of those players where it's like, good play by Hutton. Mm-hmm. And then you just kind of keep it moving, and it's like, oh, Chawinga, Bia, DiBernardo, and like all these other players. But absolutely a key cog in the machine at such a young age. Exciting player for the prospects of the national team as well.
That's a perfect encapsulation of what it's like watching her game. Like, oh, good play by Hutton. Oh, nice play, nice read there by Hutton.
Right.
Nothing extravagant, but it's just consistent. Claire Hutton, that's my very first player spotlight here on the ITC. I'm into this. I kind of want to keep it going. It gives me another thing to kind of like key in on the weekend. Very excited to hear who you've got your player spotlight on.
I like it. And now we can just try it. We can try to duel each other on who can be more of a football hipster, who can name the most obscure player, the player who's not getting enough attention, and then put our spotlight on them. So I'm up for the challenge. As long as we have the viewers vote and I win some vote eventually. I mean, my God. Okay, I digress. Who do I want to spotlight? I think this is worthy of a 2-beer show. We've been, to take people behind the curtain, I think Dino mentioned, we're working on if I can work this can of, there we go. We're working a little overtime. We're recording some of these Olympic previews. Stay tuned for that. We'll get to that later, though. So for my player spotlight, worthy of this 2-beer show, I'm going with your Orlando Pride midfielder, Adriana. Bit of an obvious pick here.
Let's go.
But I think there are some numbers kind of underlying this performance. So obviously, an impressive 3-0 win on the road in LA for your Pride against Angel City. Adriana has a brace. Let's go back to the beginning of the season. So in Adriana's first 6 appearances this season, 4 of which we will call in the time of 2024 BB, which is before Banda, Adriana was primarily listed as a forward or a winger. In that time, she accounted for 1.1 XG and 1.2 XAG, expected assisted goals. Since then, she's had her placement in the squad mixed up by Seb Hines, and her positions listed on the pitch have either primarily been a midfielder or a winger for the majority of the time. And a lot of the time, she's lining up right behind Banda. But you can tell from watching the matches, and I'll be curious to ask you about this, that it feels like she has a great deal of freedom to kind of move around. But since May 11th, her next 6 appearances, since playing more as a bit of an attacking midfielder, your traditional midfielder, a winger, Adriana has accounted for 3 expected goals and 1.6 expected assisted goals. And here's the interesting part about it to me, is that her touches and her carries have not even gone up by any real significant margin. And her pass completion percentage hasn't really skyrocketed either. That's been pretty kind of living in that mid-70s kind of range. So I will cede to your expertise here as somebody who watches this team as closely as anybody in media. The opinion that I'm going to throw out here, or maybe the theory that I'm going to throw out here, is that I just think Adriana's Brazilian footballing supercomputer of a brain just needed a little more time to efficiently recognize when to trail plays, when to lead the attack, and kind of how to fit in placed next to a supernova like Banda. What have you been seeing from her?
I'm going to actually zoom out to the whole season.
Yeah.
I think I've seen a lot of up and down play from Adriana, and not because she's been up and down, but it really is like, it's sort of a chess piece type argument. I talked last week about just how Orlando was like just throwing 8 players forward and just being like, all right, let's see you contend with this. Even with that approach, it kind of felt like the offense was still not, it's sort of like an engine running. You could still hear some stuff knocking around there. It didn't have that clean purr to it.
Yep.
But when I saw this lineup, and I'm like, oh my God, Banda and Adriana up front. Because we've seen Banda and Marta, we've seen Banda and Ali Watt, we've seen I think we've seen Banda alone and 3 behind her. We've seen a lot of different permutations of this. I think this is the first time we've seen Adri and Banda just as the 2 heads of the snake.
Yeah.
They each play their own game, but they seem to be kind of like perfect complements to each other. Like a little bit of Luka Kyrie. They both are explosive, but they've got different bags. But Adri has the skills, the creativity. She brings that Brazilian flair, and she's explosive. And I think she just can hit a ceiling. Remember we talked about this too a couple weeks ago. It was who's going to be their number 2? Mm-hmm. And if Orlando gets their number 2, we talked about the 3 in Washington. We talked about the 2 in KC, and then the whole offensive package that they've got. I was really looking to this Orlando side saying, who's going to be Banda's running partner through the end of the season? And then seeing Adri up there, it looked unguardable.
Yeah.
Pick your poison. That's the most kind of pick your poison type situation that I've seen, I think, all season. There just was no good answer that Angel City was going to be able to put forward to be able to stop that attack.
I think on that first goal, so you have Banda, she kind of starts to veer to the left, and she draws the attention. You have Marta on the left-hand side with her. And then here comes Adri, and Marta's able to serve the ball in to get it to her in a little bit of space to where she can get the ball onto her shooting foot, and then she hits that absolute missile into the top of the net. No chance for Hericic. And that's kind of what I was looking at. I think what you're alluding to here is that you just need to get her in these spaces where if you're picking your poison and your poison is to try to take away Banda, or pardon me, maybe you think the antidote is we're going to try to take away Banda. Now the poison you have picked is this Brazilian superstar, Adriana, who's able to get the ball and fire with a little bit of space.
Who's running right at you, who has you on your back foot, and can just uncork one like that. That's just ridiculous. And then I love Marta in more of a midfield role too.
Sure. Because
she still has all the ball skills. She'll take it, a little spinneroonie, just kind of leave you in a puddle and just kind of keep the offense moving. And then, just offensively, this team's really cooking defensively as well. You mentioned, now we're up to 15 matches, 11 goals allowed. At some point, somebody's going to score a 12th goal in this team. We'll see if it happens before the end of the season.
Maybe.
But your Adri point is so on the money. It's a combination of her playing off of Banda. That's
Right.
the other benefit when you don't have her in the midfield. When you have her in the midfield, she's sort of like playing within a unit. Playing off of Banda, like, you know, Banda covers so much ground that she just might pull 2 or 3 defenders out near the corner flag. And then that opens up a ton of space for, you know, the explosive striking ability of Adri and her creativity. So I don't want to jump the gun and say Seb Hines really unlocked something here, but it is possible.
Sure.
I think if we start to see performances like that from those two up front, a little bit of like, you know, what BFC I think tried to put together with Oshuala and Kundanaji hasn't quite coalesced all the way. But if we get more of this from Orlando, and there's an absolutely credible number 2 option, you know, a 1+ XG type player when she's playing next to Banda up front, that changes this team's ceiling.
Yeah, totally. It actually reminds me of something that our pal Chris Sharples, DAZN commentator, was talking about on our UEFA Women's Champions League final recap episode. Go back and check that episode out if you're interested. But when he was talking about Caroline Graham-Hansen, CGH, for Barcelona, and he referred to her kind of coming in off the wing as like a little bit of old school football, a little bit of like 1990s, early 2000s style of football, where you just have this incredible winger out there, this attacking winger who's running at you from the side and creating all these weird angles. For me, you know, when we were growing up and women's football was not quite available to watch, like Thierry Henry is that guy in my mind. He was the winger who was just unstoppable. And now you kind of see it with CGH and you see it with a lot of other, like Trinity Rodman is a great example. You see Mel Swanson do it. You see Sophia Smith do it kind of for the national team, depending on their spots. If you have that with Adriana, and you have, like you pointed out, Marta still has the skills. Marta, at worst, one of the 5 best number 10s in the NWSL. Like at worst, one of the 10 to 15 best at 38 years old, still in the world. And then Banda. Now you have Adriana kind of flying in off the wing, creating these angles with the ability to shoot, pass, score, do everything that she can do. Your squad is a problem, man. I mean, they can win the league. They could win the double if we're talking about winning the Shield and winning the NWSL championship. They could win a damn treble if they want to win the NWSL Liga MX tournament. I mean, what's the ceiling on this squad? I can't find it.
Again, you know, like, this is a team that hasn't lost all season.
Right.
You just got to scoot over that part. You know, like I mean, KC and Orlando is still unbeaten, 15 matches in. We're getting dangerously close to one, or maybe both these teams might be able to reach the finish line unbeaten. That'd be wild. But they just look like on another level, I think, both these teams. I tweeted also, Rafaele, who's been sort of in and out of the lineup, made an appearance in this one. The 10 times one of her cleats has touched a blade of grass, it's 10 wins, no draws, no losses. Like, her teams, whether it's the Orlando Pride or the Brazilian national team, they just do not lose when she plays. And all of a sudden, this team looks extremely loaded, and they seem to have found a little bit of a recipe offensively to potentially match, you know, this elite defense.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's going to be interesting to see, can the defense continue to keep up? Maybe not quite this pace, but something close to it. But I got to tell you, what evidence do we have that they're not going to? Like, they look good, man. They look solid. They look smart. You talk about Hines and the organization and the competitiveness within the roster of like these players challenging each other for playing time, but still they play so connected on top of that. So it's not like everybody's beefing, trying to get minutes on the field. It's just like, I know there are cliches about this. I tell you what I'm a sucker for. I am a sucker for when a team is playing well and when a player scores a goal, everybody runs and hugs that player. Mm-hmm. Or when somebody misses a pass that the forward just looks up and goes, thumbs up. Hey, good idea. Good pass. I like that. You see that with this Pride team. Somebody hits the deck. I know your Miami Heat are famous for this. Somebody hits the ground. Somebody runs over to them and immediately pulls them up. It helps them get up. Mm-hmm. Like, you cannot tell me, and I know it's corny, I know it's sports cliche, if you have a sense of love and togetherness in a team sport, that absolutely helps. And so I'm going a little off the board with some kind of maybe some woo-woo stuff here. But I feel like your squad has that combined with skill, combined with world-class players, combined with good coaching, combined with just an overall good organizational culture, if I may use the C word here that your Miami Heat love so much. I just think they have all of that. And I just think you guys are super live to win. And I know Adriana, she scores a brace. I pick her as my player spotlight. I think she's emblematic of a lot of things that your team is doing right now.
Absolutely, because it's within her role.
That's a great point.
It was a lot of stuff today on the men's side of the Euros with Portugal and Ronaldo, and a lot of discourse on one former legend, or I guess current legend, maybe not sort of finding a new role as seamlessly as maybe Adriana has. But that's one of the beauties of this Orlando side is like they're still working stuff out, but you don't feel like anybody's pressing. You don't feel like Marta's trying to get one because Banda got one.
Yeah.
It does feel absolutely interconnected. The chemistry is great. The vibes are great. If I'm going to be a little bit critical, committing so many players forward, like the Pride have been doing the last couple of weeks, Sydney Leroux had pretty decent look or two where it kind of felt like she was just one-on-one on one of those chances against Emily Sams. You just kind of wonder if that's a different attack, a different attacker, what that might look like. And buddy, let me tell you, this weekend, we're going to have a nice long look at a real high-power, potent attack in Kansas City and seeing what this Orlando Pride defense looks like against that roster of just absolute rainmakers in KC. This has sort of Super Bowl vibes to it. I meant to fact check this. I have to imagine this is the most matches played for two teams that are undefeated this late in the season that are going head to head. It has to be.
I would have to think so. Yeah.
So this will be match 16. Both teams heading into this one unbeaten. I mean, like, what are we doing here? Like, it's going to be straight do not disturb when this one kicks off.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting watch. I'm with you. The phone is completely on do not disturb. It's a little bit of a bummer with the timing this close to the Olympics. Mm-hmm. So obviously Chewinga will play. Malawi not in the Olympics. I'll be interested to see. I haven't seen the reporting yet, but I wonder if Banda is going to camp with Zambia. I know match week 15 was the send-off for a lot of the national team players, so it'll be interesting to see if Banda is not available for the Pride. Emily Sams is a training camp player for the U.S. women's national team. I would doubt that Sams will be available. So we might not be getting to see these teams play at full strength, but I'm still totally with you. You get to see the bones of these teams compete against each other. I think it'll also be an interesting coaching matchup between Hines and Vlatko. What do you keep in the chamber to be like, okay, well, maybe if Banda's not there, now what kind of chess game am I playing to not show any cards to Vlatko?
Yeah, I really love that angle. Yeah, it is an absolute bummer. I think we're going to see more of like a preseason type vibe in this one, unfortunately. I think I got myself too worked up thinking about the clash. But if everything works out, maybe we see these teams lock up again in the playoffs, which would just be absolutely epic. But I think it's still going to be a banger this weekend.
Totally agree. And I'm right there with you. Last week when we were talking about it, I was already hyping up this current Pride match. And then when we got to this week, they're like, send-off match for all the Olympians. I was like, oh, you're taking away the match that we wanted. So it's an interesting angle from the NWSL schedule makers. Maybe they did not expect Kansas City and Orlando to look the way they look to make them the match right before the send-off and right kind of when we get into this period where it's like we have the Olympics, but then we have the NWSL Liga MX tournament. It'll be interesting to see nonetheless. And you know what? If Temwa Chewinga is playing football somewhere, I'm watching.
100%. She's just so incredible of a player. We talked about her at the top of the show. Her ability to wear you down.
Crazy.
There was that play against Houston where she's defending the opposite end line. She tracks all the way back. She's probably the third or fourth closest to the ball as it's passing the halfway line. And by the time it gets all the way down to near the corner flag, she's on the ball, creating a goal kick for her side. Just no business being all the way down there harassing. And she just doesn't stop. Her engine is like unbelievable. She doesn't get tired, just putting pressure on you, just waiting for, one loose touch. And she's happy to just chase. She's just like, oh yeah, I'll chase you every time. I'll be a foot, 2 feet behind you every single time. just waiting for that moment where, you put the ball where it's not supposed to go and I make you pay.
Yeah, she gets the brace against Houston Dash. She gets the brace in goals, but I feel like we can call this, whether we rename it like the barbecue hat trick or whatever it is, 2 goals and then 1 football kicked into the Missouri River out of the freaking stadium. She blasts one. Yeah, I mean, and with that brace, she takes the lead in the Golden Boot race. Everything about her and the way she fits into the system, we have a great race for the Shield, what will ultimately be a great race for the title itself, great race for MVP, and a great race for Golden Boot. Everything is extremely alive. And now, in the middle of it, little thing called the Olympics that we get to watch 12 incredible teams. Just about as good of a spot as you could be in women's football right now.
Yeah, sport just keeps on giving. Yeah, the ball that Chewinga put in the river, shout out to our guy Mike Watts, who just about lost his mind. We kind of joke that he can hit 11 with the best of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he definitely hit 11, maybe a little tick higher. He dug deep on that call. So shout out to our guy. And yeah, absolutely on the Olympics coverage. We just knocked out our first preview. We talked to the great Samantha Lewis, breaking down the Matildas from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
We went real deep on that squad as well. We're going to try to cover as many countries, as many nations as we can. We're going to look at this tournament from every angle. We are ecstatic that we're just a few weeks out here. Still some NWSL business to kind of close out, but that's going to be one hell of a tournament. How many different combinations of 8 teams do you think could make the knockout stage? It feels like there could be 100 different combinations of 8 teams that might end up making it.
That is like an SAT problem there, I think, in terms of how many combinations. I was very average on my SAT, so I do not quite know the answer. But we have pretty much the 12 best teams you could compile. Obviously, this is where I say save Great Britain, because I think Great Britain would be an awesome addition to this field. I digress. But nevertheless, I think the tournament is going to be absolutely incredible. Must-watch television, much like any kind of Temwa Chewinga or Kansas City Current match. But yeah, man, it's another summer of football. We got a great summer of football with the World Cup last year, a great NWSL season. The good times keep on rolling.
All right, man. I think we did it. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I think that's it. I like this little, couple of teams to spotlight, especially going into the break. Couple of teams, couple of players. I think we did our thing today.
You know what? Next show, let's do like a full rundown of all of the big player movements, like Mary Earps and.
Did you see Justine Jelland?
Oh yeah, she went to
Wolfsburg.
Oh yeah, stuff fun.
Hate that. Probably good for her bank account, but I hate that. To the Braun Battalion, we feel for you. We're right there with you. As I believe we can safely say we're honorary members of the battalion. That news hit your boys like a ton of bricks today. Obviously, then you have Mary Earps going over to PSG. That's pretty massive. Let's carve out some time next week. We'll try to wrap our head around some of these major moves in European football. And we mentioned there is some movement into the NWSL as well, with Courtney Vine moving from the A-League in Australia over to North Carolina Courage. So we'll have plenty of player movement to talk about. Again, I'll tell you, very rarely does my heart sink when I see football news, but Jelland moving away from Braun, that one hurt. We'll get the pulse of the battalion, and we'll be back to report on it next week.
All right, man. I think we did it. It's been another episode of Into the Channel. Thank you for watching, listening, liking, subscribing, chiming in, dropping some nuggets into the comment section, and just playing and hanging out with your boys. Remember to like if you liked, and subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Links to Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much all of our socials available in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel, for always being my co-host in the spotlight. Let's fucking go. I appreciate you, man.
Likewise, buddy. I appreciate you. There are no transfer moves that are breaking up this podcast. We are a firm center back pairing, or a number 9 and a defensive midfielder, whatever spot we're in. We're in this for the long haul, and we appreciate you guys and all the kind words and the support that you've given. Thanks for rocking with us, and we will see you guys next time.